The 2017 paper that made ChatGPT, Gemini, and modern AI possible was almost a niche conference submission, and it rewired the entire trajectory of machine intelligence with one audacious idea. Throw away everything we thought we knew about how neural networks should process language and replace it with something called attention. In this video, you're going to understand exactly what that means. We will start with the painful problem that existed before this paper, build up the core intuition with a dead simple analogy, then walk through how the transformer actually works, piece by piece, until the whole picture clicks. No PhD required. Let's go. Imagine you're trying to translate a novel from French to English, but there is a cruel rule. You're only allowed to look at one word at a time, in order, and you must forget every previous word the moment you move on. That sounds insane, right? But that is almost exactly how the best AI translation systems worked before 2017. They used something called a recurrent neural network, an RNN, which processed a sentence like a conveyor belt, one token sliding in at a time, each step depending on the step before it. Think of it like a game of telephone. The first word gets passed to the second, which gets passed to the third, and by the time you reach word 50, the memory of word 1 has been whispered so many times it is basically gone. This is the so-called vanishing gradient problem, and it plagued language AI for years. But the sequential nature of RNNs created a second, equally brutal problem: speed. Because each step depended on the previous step, you could not process words in parallel. You had to wait. Training on millions of sentences was agonizingly slow, even on expensive hardware. So here's the question that the Transformer paper asked. What if we could let every single word in a sentence talk to every other word, all at the same time? What if the architecture itself had no conveyor belt at all? Before we touch any math, let's build the right intuition. Picture yourself at a loud cocktail party. There are 20 conversations happening around you at once. Yet somehow, your brain is not trying to process every sound equally. It is doing something remarkable. It is selectively focusing, paying attention to the conversation that is most relevant to you right now. If someone across the room says your name, your brain snaps toward that signal instantly, even through all the noise. That selective relevance is the heart of the attention mechanism. Now apply that to a sentence. Take the sentence. The animal did not cross the street because it was too tired. What does it refer to? The animal, not the street. A human knows this immediately. But a model reading word by word struggles because it and animal are far apart in the sequence. Attention solves this by letting the word look back across the entire sentence and ask, which other word here is most relevant to figuring out what I mean? It assigns a relevant score to every word and then builds its understanding from the most important ones. In the paper, they described this with 3 concepts: a query, a key, and a value. The query is the question a word is asking. What am I looking for? The key is what each other word is advertising about itself. And the value is the actual information that gets passed along if the match is good. It is like a search engine inside the model, running for every single word simultaneously. To appreciate what the transformer does, you need to know what it replaced. Before this paper, translation models used an encoder-decoder architecture. The encoder reads the input sentence and squishes all of its meaning into a single fixed-size vector. Think of it like summarizing an entire book into one paragraph. Then the decoder reads that paragraph and generates the translation word by word. The problem is obvious in hindsight. Forcing an entire sentence's meaning into one fixed vector is a bottleneck. A short sentence, fine. A long, complex sentence? You are trying to pour an ocean into a cup. Researchers did actually patch this with attention mechanisms bolted onto RNNs, letting the decoder peek back at different parts of the encoder's output, and this helped a lot. But the recurrence was still there, the conveyor belt was still grinding, and the sequential bottleneck had not gone away. What the transformer paper proposed was radical. Keep the encoder-decoder shape, an encoder that reads the input, a decoder that writes the output, but rip out every recurrent and convolutional layer entirely. Replace them all with stacked layers of pure attention. That is the whole bet, and it paid off enormously. The encoder in the transformer is a stack of 6 identical layers. The decoder is also a stack of 6 layers. Both are built entirely from attention and small feed-forward networks. No memory cells, no convolutions, just attention all the way down. All right, this is where we get into the actual mechanism, and it is genuinely elegant. Remember the query, key, value idea from the cocktail party? Here is how it becomes math without the terror. Every word in your sentence is converted into a vector. Think of it as a list of numbers that captures the word's meaning. From that vector, the model learns to produce 3 smaller vectors: a query vector, a key vector, and a value vector. Each one is learned during training, like tuning knobs. To figure out how much attention the word it should pay to the word animal, you take the query vector of it and compute the dot product with the key vector of animal. A dot product is just a measure of how aligned 2 arrows are. If they point in the same direction, the score is high. Do this for every word pair in the sentence, and you get a grid of raw attention scores. Now, there's a subtle engineering trick. The paper divides each score by the square root of the key vector's dimension. This scaling step prevents the scores from getting so large that the next operation, a softmax, gets stuck in a flat region where gradients barely flow. Think of it like making sure the volume knob on your stereo does not clip the signal. After softmax, the scores become weights that sum to 1, probabilities. Multiply each weight by the corresponding value vector and add them all up, and you have the new representation for that word. A representation that now contains information gathered from every other word, weighted by relevance. And crucially, this entire operation is one giant matrix multiplication. It runs in parallel for all words at once. That is why it is so fast. Here is where the transformer gets genuinely clever. Doing attention once is powerful. But what if different aspects of meaning require you to look for different kinds of relationships simultaneously? Think about how a film director sets up a shot. One camera captures the wide establishing scene. Another is a close-up on the actor's face. A third catches the reaction in the background. Each camera is looking at the same moment from a different angle, and together they tell a richer story than any one camera could. Multi-head attention does exactly this for language. Instead of running attention just once with the full-size vectors, the transformer runs attention 8 times in parallel. 8 heads, each with smaller projected versions of the query, key, and value vectors. Each head can specialize. One head might learn to track grammatical subject-verb agreement. Another might focus on coreference, that it refers back to animal. Another might capture positional proximity. None of these heads are told what to specialize in. They figure it out during training completely on their own. After all 8 heads compute their attention outputs, the results are concatenated into a single big vector and passed through one more linear transformation to blend the perspectives together. The paper uses 8 heads with 64-dimensional vectors each, which gives the same total computation as doing one single attention pass with 512 dimensions. So you get 8 diverse perspectives for essentially the same computational cost. That is a remarkable deal. There's one more problem we have to address, and it is sneaky. If attention lets every word look at every other word simultaneously, the model has no idea which word came first. Dog bites man, and man bites dog would produce the exact same attention scores because the words are the same, just shuffled. Order matters enormously in language. An RNN got order for free because it processed tokens sequentially. But a transformer processes everything in parallel, so it needs another way to know position. The solution is positional encoding. Before words enter the encoder, the model adds a special signal to each word's vector, a unique pattern of numbers that encodes that word's position in the sentence. The paper uses sine and cosine waves of different frequencies. Think of it like a musical chord where each position gets a unique combination of notes. Position 1 gets one chord, position 2 gets a slightly different chord, and so on. These patterns have a nice mathematical property. The model can figure out relative distances between positions just by doing arithmetic on the patterns. Word at position 5 and word at position 8, their encodings have a predictable mathematical relationship. This means the model can learn to reason about how far apart two words are without ever having to process them sequentially. It is a clever hack, injecting the information the architecture lost when it dropped the conveyor belt. And here is the wild part. The researchers also tried learning the positional encodings from scratch during training and got nearly identical results. The sinusoidal version was kept because it can extrapolate to sentence lengths the model has never seen before. Now we can see the whole machine. The transformer has two halves, an encoder and a decoder. The encoder takes the input sentence, say, an English sentence, and processes it through 6 identical layers. Each layer does two things. First, multi-head self-attention, where every English word builds a rich representation by attending to all other English words. Second, a small feed-forward network applied independently to each word's updated representation, like a per-word thinking step. Both steps are wrapped in what is called a residual connection. The original input is added back to the output, which helps the signal survive deep in the network, and then normalized. After 6 such layers, each English word has a deeply contextualized vector representation that has soaked in information from the entire sentence. The decoder works similarly, but with one extra twist. It also has to attend to the encoder's output. This is where the translation actually happens, where German words in progress reach back and ask the English representations what they mean. But the decoder also uses a masked self-attention layer for its own already generated output words. The masking prevents the decoder from peeking at future words it has not generated yet. Otherwise, training would be cheating. The decoder generates output one token at a time during inference, but because of the masking trick, it can still be trained on all positions in parallel. That is a subtle but critical engineering insight. The result is an architecture that is simultaneously more parallelizable, faster to train, and better at capturing long-range dependencies than anything that came before it. So, how does it actually work? The paper tests on 2 major machine translation benchmarks from 2014, English to German and English to French. And the results are not just better, they're strikingly better at a fraction of the cost. The standard measure for translation quality is called BLEU score. You can think of it as a grade out of 100 for how close the machine translation is to a human reference. Higher is better. On English to German, the big transformer model scored 28.4. The previous best single model scored around 26.3. More than 2 points better sounds modest, but in this field, 2 BLEU points is a significant leap. On English to French, the transformer hit 41.8 BLEU, a new record for a single model. Here is the part that really catches your attention. It trained in 3.5 days on 8 GPUs. The previous best models needed roughly 4 times the compute, and some competitive ensemble models needed 10 times as much. So the transformer was simultaneously more accurate and dramatically cheaper to train. The paper also runs an ablation study. That is where you remove individual pieces of the architecture to see what each part contributes. Removing attention heads hurts. Reducing the key dimension hurts. Dropout helps significantly with generalization. Every piece earns its place. And to prove the idea generalizes beyond translation, they tested it on English sentence parsing, a completely different task with different structure, and it again matched or beat specialized models. This was the signal that attention was not a trick for translation. It was a general-purpose engine for understanding sequences. Let's zoom out and ask the most important question. Why did this work so much better? There are 3 real reasons, and they stack on each other. First, path length. In a recurrent network, a signal from word 1 has to travel through every intermediate word to reach word 50. That is a path of length 50. In a transformer, every word is directly connected to every other word in a single attention layer. The path length is always one. Long-range dependencies, like it referring to animal 15 words earlier, are trivially easy to learn when they're always just one step away. Second, parallelism. Because attention is just matrix multiplication with no sequential dependencies, modern GPUs can compute it for all word pairs simultaneously. This is not a minor speedup. It is the difference between taking months to train a model and taking days. Researchers can iterate faster, explore more ideas, and build bigger models. Third, and this one is subtle, the attention matrix is interpretable. When you visualize which words each attention head focuses on, you see genuinely interesting patterns. One head learns to track which noun a pronoun refers to. Another head tracks the syntactic structure of the sentence. The model is not just memorizing, it is learning real linguistic structure emergently from data. Now here's the thing that should genuinely unsettle you a little. This paper was about translation, but the architecture it proposed, the transformer, became the foundation for GPT, BERT, and every large language model you have heard of. The authors thought they were solving machine translation. They were actually building the engine for a new era of artificial intelligence. The transformer is not magic, and the paper is honest about the rough edges. The attention mechanism has a cost that grows with the square of the sequence length. Double the length of your input, and attention gets 4 times more expensive. This means the original transformer struggles with very long documents. Think books, not sentences. The researchers noted this themselves and flagged it as future work. They were right to flag it, because the field spent years solving exactly this problem with models like Longformer, Reformer, and eventually Flash Attention. There's also the question of the positional encoding. It is a somewhat inelegant patch for a problem the architecture creates by design. Later work, like the rotary position embeddings used in models like Llama, found more elegant solutions. And of course, the paper had no idea that scaling these architectures to hundreds of billions of parameters would produce emergent capabilities that nobody predicted. In context learning, chain of thought reasoning, writing code. Those behaviors were not designed. They appeared. Which raises a question I will leave with you. If scaling a 2017 architecture with no fundamental changes produces something that can pass the bar exam and write software, what does that tell us about the nature of intelligence itself? Is understanding just pattern matching at sufficient scale? Or is there something qualitatively different that larger models are reaching for? That debate is very much alive. And it all traces back to 8 engineers at Google in 2017 asking a deceptively simple question. What if attention is all you need? If this video helps something click for you, hit like. It genuinely helps this channel reach more curious people. Subscribe if you want a next deep dive, because we're just getting started. 7 years ago, a team of researchers asked whether you could build a sequence model with 0 recurrence, 0 convolution, and pure attention. And the answer turned out to reshape every corner of AI. We went from a conveyor belt that forgot words to an architecture where every word listens to every other word at once, where 8 attention heads develop their own specializations, where positional sine waves stand in for sequential memory. And somehow, scaling that idea produced systems that can reason, code, and converse. Here is the question I keep coming back to. The transformer was designed for translation and achieved general intelligence as a side effect. What does that mean for how we think about building minds? Drop your take in the comments. I read them all. If this video earned a place in your feed, a like takes 2 seconds and means a lot. Subscribe for the next deep dive. We are covering BERT, the paper that took the transformer and trained it to understand language rather than just generate it. See you there.